The clink of silver against glass cut through the room, sharp enough to hush the chatter. I turned toward the sound, my half-filled champagne flute still in hand, just passed to me by a server weaving through the crowd. My father, Ellis Royce, stood at the head table, cheeks flushed, eyes glossy, maybe from sentiment, maybe from the third glass of red he swore wasn't hitting him. Before we toast, he began his voice loud and rehearsed Marcia and I want to share something special. I shifted my weight, my heels pinching against the polished ballroom floor of the Cedar Grove estate. The air hummed with tipsy anticipation. Across the room, my sister Sorrel glowed in the candlelight framed by her new husband Brandon, white roses and fairy lights. My father cleared his throat. "Sorrel, Brandon, your mother and I talked about what it means to start a life together. So today, as our gift to you, we're giving you something that has held our family for decades." He faced the crowd. "We're giving them our home." A pause. Thick, heavy, like even the chandeliers held their breath. Then applause. I didn't move. My champagne quivered as my fingers tightened around the stem. I felt the glances, soft smiles, nods, a collective awe rippling across the tables. My breath caught. The home. The one I'd been paying for every month without fail for nearly 7 years, heat crawled up my neck. I forced my jaw to stay loose as my mother dabbed her eyes with a linen napkin, overwhelmed by the sweetness. Sorrel gasped theatrically, leaning into Brandon's shoulder. I stayed silent. I sat through the speeches, my smile on autopilot, eyes locked on the centerpiece. I laughed when expected, raised my glass when cued, even hugged Sorrel when she swooped in with giddy tears and smudged lipstick. But later, as the music swelled and dancing began, I slipped off my shoes and left the venue quietly, the weight of those 7 years pressing harder with every step. I didn't go home. I drove straight to the house. The porch light glowed when I pulled into the driveway, no cars parked out front. I sat for a moment staring at the blue shutters I'd repainted last spring. My key still worked. Of course it did. The transfer wasn't final, not legally at least. Inside, everything felt familiar. Framed photos lined the hallway, beach vacations, birthdays, Sorrel's college graduation. My pictures were there too, but fewer. Always fewer. I paused by the living room, my eyes drawn to the fireplace mantel. That summer when I was 12, I'd scraped off the old paint myself, sanding until my hands blistered. My mother clucked her tongue, but later bragged to guests, "That one never stops working." It was always like that. Growing up, Sorrel was the sparkle, the sweetness, the girl who made people laugh effortlessly. I was the one who memorized the grocery list, set the dinner table, packed my own lunch when Mom forgot. I was the daughter who didn't cry when plans changed, who understood when money was tight, who heard. "You're so mature for your age," like it was praise, not dismissal. On my 10th birthday, I asked for a sleepover. It became cupcakes at the kitchen table with 2 classmates. 3 months later, Sorrel's 5th birthday had a backyard puppet show and rented ponies. "We had more flexibility this time," Mom said. "And you're not really into all that fuss anyway, right?" The pattern held. Braces delayed for better insurance. College tuition was my responsibility because you're the planner. When Sorrel picked art school out east, our parents co-signed her loan without hesitation. I learned not to ask. My usefulness made me indispensable, but never central. Now standing in the kitchen I'd helped remodel, I could hear my mother's voice. "You've always been the strong one. We never had to worry about you." I stared at the fridge, at the magnets I'd bought on business trips, at the floral notepad with my handwriting on the grocery list. The strength they admired was convenience. And convenience, I realized, was easy to forget. I opened a drawer, found the old file folder with house receipts, and flipped it open. The folder was right where it always was, tucked between appliance manuals and the emergency vet's number from when Sorrel's cat ate the poinsettias. I sifted through utility receipts, property tax letters, HOA notices. Then I found the mortgage statement, the last one I'd paid. It was still addressed to Ellis and Marcia Royce. Not me. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The auto payment for $2, $365 had gone through 2 weeks ago, like it had every month for nearly 7 years. Never missed, rarely thanked. It was just part of my life, like brushing my teeth, like believing I was helping. I remembered the conversation clearly. My father called voice tight. He'd been laid off after nearly 3 decades at his engineering firm. "It's just temporary," he said. "We've got a little saved, but your mom's treatment is costing more than insurance covers." I didn't hesitate. "Let me help," I said. They pushed back at first pride, I thought, but eventually let me cover the mortgage for a little while. Dad said it over coffee one cold morning, his hand around the chipped mug I'd given him years ago. "This house will be yours someday, Callan. You're not just helping us, you're investing in your future." I believed him. I kept believing through his jobless months, through Mom's reduced hours, through their requests to tack on a little extra for taxes, roof repairs, prescriptions. I adjusted my life, delayed buying a second property, downgraded my car lease, skipped vacations. I thought it was a trade. Stability now for security later. Not charity, not a donation. But standing in that dim kitchen, receipts spread across the counter, something in me shifted. There was no paperwork with my name. No partial ownership, no record of their promise, only a house that wasn't mine, and a wedding toast that proved it never would be. I closed the folder and slid it back into the drawer. Then I opened my email and started typing the name of my friend who worked in probate law. It was 3 months before the wedding, a quiet, bright Sunday morning. I'd stopped by unannounced with a bouquet of tulips and Mom's favorite cinnamon rolls from Alder in Maine. They hadn't answered my texts, but their car was in the driveway, porch light on. I let myself in as always. Voices drifted from the dining room, low measured. Dad's deeper tone, Mom's clipped replies, and a third voice, male, polished, too polished. When I rounded the corner, they froze. 3 coffee mugs, a folder open on the table, legal pads, a pen still in the man's hand. Mom stood abruptly. "Callan? We didn't hear you come in." The man smiled, a practiced smile meant to smooth over discomfort. He started packing his papers without a word. "I just brought flowers," I said, holding them up like a shield. "Did I interrupt something?" Dad rubbed the back of his neck. "Nothing urgent, just going over some paperwork." With a lawyer, I asked, watching the man close a slim leather case. "We're updating a few things," Mom said quickly. "You know estate planning, we're not getting any younger. Since when does that involve secret meetings on a Sunday?" Dad chuckled, but his eyes stayed flat. "We didn't mean to keep it from you. It's just logistics, insurance, medical directives, stuff like that." The lawyer buttoned his coat and offered his hand. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Royce. You have a very dedicated family." I shook his hand but didn't smile. After he left, Mom insisted on tea, steeping the bags and adding too much honey like it was a performance. I sat at the counter watching her bustle. When Dad joined us, he repeated, "Just trying to make sure everything's simple. Clean. No surprises." I nodded slowly, saying nothing. But the seed was planted. Their glance. Their hesitation. The folder I wasn't allowed to touch. They were rearranging things behind my back and had been for a while. I clapped. It was automatic, like muscle memory. My hands came together even as my stomach sank, even as my chest tightened beneath my dress's fitted bodice. Sorrel's eyes were wide with theatrical shock, one hand on her heart, the other clutching Brandon's arm like she might faint from joy. "Our house," she gasped, voice cracking. "You're giving us your house." Mom nodded, dabbing tears with her monogrammed napkin. Dad looked proud, like he'd just handed over a gift wrapped in gold, not a home I'd maintained with quiet sacrifice. The applause swelled, swallowed me whole. Someone leaned over and whispered, "Such a generous gesture." Another added, "So rare to see a family pass down something with such meaning." Meaning. My mind spiraled back. The winter I paid for a new furnace when the heat died in a snowstorm. The spring I covered the plumber for frozen pipes. The summer I painted the garage while my parents were at the beach with Sorrel and Brandon. The fall I found mold under the bathroom sink and replaced the vanity myself to save on labor. $7,000 here. $4 and $300 there. 100 hours I never counted. Think of it as your future, Dad had said more than once. And now that future was packaged with a bow and handed to someone else. Sorrel squealed and hugged Mom, who stumbled slightly under the embrace. "We'll take such good care of it," she said, glowing. I looked at my glass. The champagne had gone flat. I sipped it anyway. After dinner, I posed for pictures. I fixed the clasp on Sorrel's necklace before the cake cutting. I passed napkins to a flower girl who spilled lemonade and smiled for the photographer when asked. My hands never shook. My voice never cracked. But when the DJ announced the first dance and the crowd turned to the dance floor, I grabbed my clutch, slipped through a side door, and vanished into the parking lot. I didn't cry. I just drove each mile, stretching the distance between me and the applause. The next morning, I drove from the hotel to my parents' house. The front door was unlocked as always. I stepped into the quiet living room and found them at the kitchen table, still in their wedding clothes, Mom in a silk robe, Dad with his tie loosened, both sipping coffee like it was any other Sunday. "I want to talk about the house," I said, my voice flat. They exchanged glances, a flicker passing between them. Dad set his mug down carefully. "Callan, now's not the time. You gave away the house I've been paying for." I cut in. "For 7 years." Mom shifted in her chair. "We never asked you to." I blinked. "I mean, we appreciated it." She went on, smoothing the napkin in her lap. "But we didn't expect it. You offered, and we always said someday it would be yours, but things change." Dad spoke softer. "Sorrel's starting her life. You're already established. She needed a foundation." I laughed, but there was no warmth in it. A foundation. That foundation was built on my money, my time, my belief in you, and you gave it away without a word. "We didn't think you'd mind," Mom said almost gently. Something in me cracked. I turned, walked out, got in my car, and drove with shaking hands. I didn't go home. I ended up at Nova's apartment, letting myself in with the key she'd given me years ago. Nova didn't ask questions. She handed me a glass of water and pulled a blanket off the couch. I sat numb. When the words came, they spilled out raw and uneven. Every detail, every lie, every moment I'd swallowed until it became routine. When I finished, Nova sat beside me quiet for a long time. "This isn't about the house," she finally said. "It's about being disposable. And you're not." I exhaled slowly. My head pounded. "You gave them years," Nova said. "Now it's time to give yourself something back." I nodded. "This," she said, "is where you draw the line." That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up my financial records. It started with a voicemail. "Just thinking," Dad said casually, "about what comes next for your mom and me. The house is feeling a bit too busy now with Sorrel and Brandon settling in. We're exploring options." I listened without responding. 3 days later, Mom texted, "Would love to chat about the lake place. Your dad's blood pressure's been up again. Doctor said quieter surroundings might help." I didn't reply. Then came the dinner invitation, a quick catch-up over chicken salad and iced tea. I arrived with guarded politeness, sitting across from them at the kitchen table I'd helped replace 2 summers ago. Mom smiled tightly. "We thought since the lake house is just sitting there?" "No," I said. Calm, final. Dad blinked. "Just for a few months, while we figure out what's next." "You gave away the house I paid for," I said evenly. "You don't get to ask for another one," Mom scoffed. "It's not like we're taking it from you. You're assuming it belongs to you to borrow." "We're your parents," Callan, Dad said. "Family helps family." I stood, "And family respects boundaries. I won't offer that house." "Don't ask again." I left without dessert. A week later, a letter arrived, certified, neatly folded. From an attorney. Not the one I'd met that Sunday morning, but a new name. It said my parents were formally requesting temporary use of the Michigan property, citing familial obligation and historical patterns of support. I sat on my couch reading it twice. Historical patterns. I forwarded it to Daphne, my attorney friend, with one line. "Looks like the past isn't done with me." Daphne's reply was quick. "They're bluffing. But we'll respond, and this time we'll put everything in writing." The knot in my chest tightened, then loosened slightly. I hadn't expected them to weaponize my generosity, but maybe I should have. I opened my phone, dragged a new scanned receipt into my archive, and labeled it Boundary Enforcement. The next morning, the precinct called. There'd been a wellness check filed in my name. The knock came just after 8. I opened the door to two officers on my porch, their expressions neutral but alert. One spoke gently. "Ma'am, we received a call from a family member concerned about your well-being. Claimed you hadn't been answering texts or calls. Said you sounded distressed last time they spoke to you." I stared, the implication hitting fast and loud. "Who called?" The officer checked his notes. "A Sorrel Royce." I inhaled slowly. "I'm fine," I said. "Very much fine." They asked to come in. I let them. They scanned my clean apartment, the unread book on the table, the steaming mug of tea. They left 10 minutes later, satisfied. I didn't cry until the door clicked shut. It wasn't just a wellness check. It was a performance. A documented attempt to paint me as unstable, my refusal as dangerous, unhinged. A sister's concern, nothing more. I sat at my desk and opened the file I'd been building. Emails, transfer confirmations, text threads, mortgage statements, now a typed summary of the police visit. Daphne called an hour later. "You're documenting all of this I started 2 weeks ago." "Good. We escalate if they escalate. And this is escalation." My voice didn't shake anymore. "They want me to break, or back down, or both. Then let's make sure they get neither." That night I reread their attorney's letter. Then I drafted my own. No emotion. No pleading. Just facts, figures, and one firm line: I will not be contacted again without counsel present. I hit send and shut my laptop. The silence that followed was the first I'd chosen for myself. I arrived at the cafe first, picking a corner table where I could see the door. I set the folder in front of me unopened. My parents walked in 5 minutes late. Mom looked tired, Dad more so. They sat without a greeting. I skipped small talk. I pushed the folder forward. Everything I've paid, 7 years, mortgage, taxes, repairs, prescriptions, groceries, annotated, itemized, verified. Dad opened it, flipped through a few pages, then closed it. "We never asked you to keep track like this." "You never asked at all," I said. Mom folded her hands. "Callan, we understand you're upset, but involving lawyers threatening to cut us off. That's not who you are." I met her gaze. "You don't know who I am. You only know what I've given." "We're family," Dad said. "We've made mistakes, but this isn't hostility. It's a boundary," I replied. "I don't owe you anything. Not the lake house, not more money, not forgiveness. I'm not your safety net." Mom's voice rose. "You're punishing us for loving your sister." "No," I said, standing. "I'm finally choosing myself." I left the folder on the table, walked past the barista pretending not to listen, out into the hum of traffic and the early fall breeze. They didn't call out. I didn't expect them to. By spring, the house on Overton Drive had ivy creeping across the gutters, a cracked front step still unrepaired. Sorrel posted less online. Brandon stopped entirely. Rumors trickled through mutual friends. Tension money issues, things not as perfect as they seemed. I didn't follow closely. I was busy signing papers for a historic 3-bedroom in Lincoln City. It needed work, old windows, bad pipes, but it was mine, bought with my earnings, no one else's promises. One Saturday, Dad showed up unannounced, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. He didn't ask for anything, just said, "I'm sorry," and meant it. I nodded. That was enough for now. A month later, Mom called, not to ask, to listen. She mentioned therapy, said it was hard, said she was trying. I listened cautious but didn't hang up. We met for lunch once a month after that. Nothing heavy, just space to breathe, rebuild slowly without expectation. The lake house stayed mine, untouched by requests, unburdened by guilt. Sometimes I stayed there alone. Sometimes with Nova, who brought wine, sarcasm, and warmth that asked for nothing. The silence in my life didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. And as I watered the new hydrangeas in my own backyard, I understood something simple and unshakable. My legacy didn't start with what they gave me. It started the moment I stopped asking.